Hi everyone, welcome to Animation Juice. My name's Richard and today is Move It Monday, which means it's time for another animation tutorial. And in this episode of Move It Monday, we are going to be looking at the flower sack. This is the first tutorial we've done on the flower sack, and everything that we've been doing so far, looking at the bouncing ball and last week with the bouncing box, has been leading up to animating the flower sack. The flower sack is basically a construction of a cube and a sphere fitted end to end, and it is a brilliant animation tool to learn not only the basics of animation but also to start to lead us into performance, which is what we're as character animators ultimately looking to do. So without further ado, let's jump in. Okay, so here we are in Flash, and to start off with, what I'm going to show you is the flower sack construction. In the last few episodes we were looking at bouncing balls, and in the previous episode we looked at bouncing boxes, and I said that the flower sack is really a construction of the two. And here I've just got a mock-up of this flower sack, and inside it you can see it really is made up of a cube, let's put that in a different layer, a cube and a sphere just stacked on top of each other. It is a really simple form, and you can see with the cube and the sphere stacked on top of each other, you've then got the sort of the skin, or this the sack that these two are housed in. And then at the corners of the sack, you've just got little nubs for indications of feet and hands or ears, depending on what you're trying to do with it. It's a really great tool to practice getting some performance with your character animation without being bogged down with loads of details. It's a really simple form, but you can get as much appeal and as much performance out of this simple form as you can with a full-bodied, two-arm, two legs, fully facial details, lip sync, hair, cloth. You don't need that is advanced character animation, but you can practice with a much more simple form. And the tool that has been used in the past to do that with is being the flower sack. But in this episode, I'm just going to take you through familiarising ourselves with the flower sack, looking at the construction, and just doing a simple little jump with this guy, just to get used to the form and just getting to know him really. And you can see that I've just thumbnailed out this jump that we're going to be doing today. This is something that I do when approaching any animated scene, really, just to think through the movement and just get stuff on the page. And let me just go. And you can see everything that we've been learning in the past few tutorials. Again, we looked at the bouncing ball with all of the basics, then we moved it onto the bouncing box, which was a slightly more complex form, and now we're using the exact same principles again, but on a slightly more complex form still. It's not very complex, but we're just graduating very slowly to more complex forms while still trying to retain all of the principles of animations that we've been learning so far. And so here is the thumbnails that I would do for, in this case, this is the jump. And you can see we've got our normal pose here. Then we go down to our squash. Let's write that down here, squash. Then we've got our stretch. and then it comes up into the apex of the jump, and then again we've got our stretch frame back down again. This is going into our squash. Oops, there we go. And then just back to normal. Because the flower sac has an indication of arms or ears and feet, the little nubbins on the edge of the sac, we're starting to. He looks a little bit like the magic carpet from Aladdin, and the magic carpet from Aladdin didn't have any mouth, didn't have eyes or anything, but he had such personality. He was quite, in the beginning, quite sneaky, mischievous, and ultimately was very valiant. And all from just a single, very simple rug with little nubbins at each corner to indicate hands and legs. So you can get a lot of personality. And the great with the flower sac as well is it's sort of bottom heavy. You saw in our construction that it's sort of a half-filled flower sac. So the ball shape at the bottom is where most of the weight is in him. It's got a bit of a belly. It's full of flour, and the top half, whilst it is solid in form, is much lighter, and in my head anyway, it doesn't have as much weight in it, and so it's a great tool to practice with squash and stretch and to get some of the a convincing depiction of weight in your work. So there's the construction. Here are the thumbnails that I would go through when approaching a little simple jump like this with a character. I mean, we are thinking of this guy as a character now, so it's really exciting to progress that far already. So what I've done is, just like in last episode, I have keyframed this guy out already. I've added some frames in, but I've also timed it out, just to save a little bit of time. I've timed it out because as we're going along, these tutorials are going to get slightly more complex, and so we don't want to be going over the same basic principles each time. And these are all based on the thumbnails that I did. You see, I did the thumbnails first, and then we'll go back and clean it up, and then time it out. And there we go. So there's the stretch, up, hang time, and then starting to move back down again. Our big stretch right before our squash, and then a little settle. Exactly the same as the bouncing ball, exactly the same as the bouncing box, except this time, instead of a bouncing ball and a bouncing box, we've got a bouncing ball and a bouncing box on top of each other, wrapped in a skin or a sack. But the principles are exactly the same. So I've timed this out. There's the keyframes. Oops, it is. Let me just... So there's the keyframes, all timed out, and you can see it works pretty well already. It feels nice. Really, the key for getting the right keyframes based on the animation principles, squash and stretch, and adding an indication of spacing just by timing out the keyframes and leaving long gaps where the spacing of the drawings are going to be quite close together. And really, what we're really going to be doing in Flash, the benefit of Flash is because for instance, for the instance here on frame 3, 4, he's moving down. We've got from frame 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So about 7 frames there. He isn't going to be doing, he's really heavy, so I really want him to be really getting, really tensing the muscles and getting that coil, the coil in his muscles or whatever he has, to overcome gravity just for a few seconds before coming back down to earth. But these frames here, between 5 and 12, are really, if you were hand drawing this traditionally, you would have to, or your in-betweener would have to draw all of these frames just to show that it was still moving. It's a moving hold, you would call it. But not much is happening. But in Flash, we can just, what we will do eventually is just gradually take this exact same drawing and just transform the same vector drawing and just down a little bit. So we can, even drawing this in Flash, we can still make use of digital tools to help us out a little bit. And the same with the hang time up here. We've got our keyframes, and you'll also notice that I've got our little dummy reminder of the basic form of this flower sack, just to remind ourselves of volume whenever we're squashing and stretching him and manipulating him, applying him around all over the place. That is just up in the top there, just to remind us of the volume and to maintain it throughout. Sometimes, as often happens as you go along your animation, sometimes the tendency for him to lose volume, especially with me anyway. So I like to have the first frame just over the top there, just to remind myself of where we come from and where we're going to. So there's our flower set. We've looked at the construction, we've looked at the thumbnails, we've got our keyframes based off our thumbnails. We've the knowledge of the construction in our head, and I've timed these keyframes out. So now what I'm going to do is, like last episode, I'm just going to go in and start adding some a few in-betweens here and there. I'll start between 1 and 3, but we'll see. So I'm going to go ahead and start to keyframe this, and so I'm going to go ahead and start in-betweening these this flower sack, and let you know what I'm doing as we go along. Okay. So what I'm doing here is I'm grabbing the feet from the previous frame I'm just going to copy them by, well, I'm grab them by hitting L to grab the lasso tool, selecting the feet area, pressing copy. I'm just going to delete that area and paste it, just because I don't want the feet aren't moving at this point. I want them to be stable on the ground. Otherwise, they're going to be flicking all over the place, and it's going to be slightly confusing. So. I want to ease out of this first frame, so I'm going to duplicate the first keyframe by holding Alt and dragging the keyframe to the next frame. And I want there to be a little bit of movement, but not much, just to start off. You know, we're spacing. I want to space the drawings weighted to the first keyframe, to the first pose, and so it's just to start the movement off. And I don't want to be much movement, so I'm going to copy the first keyframe and just, you know, just deform it. And transform it down ever so slightly, not much, just something to there, barely anything, just something to start the movement off. Now I'm not worrying too much about the arms or legs just yet. I want to get the main forms moving. Now, here's something that I'm going to do, which is a really useful tip, especially if you're drawing animation in Flash, is I'm noticing that I really want to keep the feet planted where they are, but squash the torso. I mean, the movement is so subtle now that I don't have to redraw every single frame. It's going to look a little bit messy and flicky, but also it's quicker to just transform it. However, each time I'm making an adjustment, I'm having to select just the torso and leaving the feet alone. An easy way to do this would be to be able to just grab the torso anytime I want to make an adjustment. And to do that, when you're drawing in Flash, if you're using movie clips, then the objects are usually already separated into movie clips. But if you're drawing, what you can do is select the area that you want to have more readily available to transform, and hit Command G, and that's going to give you this. It's going to put it into a group, and you know it's in a group because it's in this green box. If I move it up there, you can see that the feet are now separate from this, and I can rub out to as much as I like, but it's not going to rub out the feet. And so now I can copy this frame to the next one, and I can start to give some more subtle squashes just with the torso, and know that the feet are now in place. I mean, there is a bit of compression on the feet, which I don't mind. I mean, he's really heavy and quite large, and so there is going to be some pressure on the feet, but at some point they are going to the friction on the ground is going to stop them, and that whilst the body still is compressing. So using the use of groups in hand-drawn animation in Flash is actually a really useful tool, and I recommend that you use it. So I've done the animating the up part of it. Now I'm going to animate the down. You'll see that I have left these gaps, and we'll address that in the final pass. Just quickly, there'll be space for the arms to do whatever the arms are going to do. I'm not entirely sure what the arms are going to do just yet, but I don't want to in between every single keyframe until I've done the arm pass. I'm going to, for now, I'm going to leave them on 2s, and by 2 it just means that the same image is duplicated twice. So this frame is for 7 and 8, then 8 and 9, 11 and 12, as opposed to this beginning bit where 1, 2, 3, 4, they're all different images on successive frames. That would be ones. It lends a more smoother result, and this is where the same image is exposed in the old speech where they used to take pictures of the frames. These images are exposed for 2 frames each, so the same image is exposed for 2 frames. There you see. But that'll probably get turned to ones when we go back and do the arm pass, but we'll see. So now I'm just going to carry on finishing the in-betweens for the downward movement. Now for the settle at the end, I'm just going to copy these squash frames by just dragging over them, right clicking, then going down to copy frames. I'm going to come over here and I'm just going to move the cursor where I want the first frame to be, and then just hit F5 to give me some space. And then right click and paste frames, and that's gonna give me some free settle in. Let's just copy that frame from the beginning. Paste it. That's just to get. We may probably end up changing it, but it's just to get just to see the movement. Get some quick read in there. Let's see how that looks. Okay, so the movement is there. What I'm going to do is, I'm happy with how the movement is progressing. I'm just going to fill in the blanks now. Just to smooth the whole thing out, not really thinking about the arms and legs. That I may subconsciously start addressing those as I'm going, but I'm really focusing on just smoothing out the main movement now that I'm happy with how that's the overall thing is feeling. I'm going to smooth it out, thinking about the construction, about the rectangle and the circle beneath the sack. Smooth it all out, and then once we've done that pass, we'll do a final pass where we go into and just add the details on the arms and legs. Like we did with the tail on the raccoon skin hat a few episodes ago, we're going to apply that same overlapping follow through motion on the arms and the legs, mainly on the arms, because the legs are driving this action. Though there will be a bit of, at the beginning, this, I imagine that the top little nubbins on the sack are actually arms in this case, and he's really kind of bending down. So when you're about to jump, you sort of raise your elbows up and you're coiling, you're spring loading yourself for that jump, and so it'll be mainly on the way back down again where we'll have that raccoon skin, overlapping action. So let's go in and smooth the whole thing out, just adding some in-betweens, cleaning up slightly, but we're not going to focus too much on cleaning up at this point. And then we're going to do one more pass where we look at the adding the arm motion. So let's do that. Alright, so here we go. We've done all of the in-betweens. We've got our full thing working. And there it is in the preview. Now there is one last pass we need to do on it, because there's still a few things that look a little bit stiff and jerky, and that is the adding the overlap on the arms, just like we did with the tail, the raccoon tail on that hat a few episodes ago. And that's really going to make the whole thing feel silky smooth and just bring it all together. So that's the last thing that I'm going to do, and I'll see you when it's done. Same frame. They're reaching their destination at exactly the same frame. They're what they're it's like a mirror image of each other. Now that's not good. We want to not just overlap, not just have the movement following through and overlapping the nubs, but we also want to overlap in the sense that we want different body parts to arrive in the pose at slightly different times. We want to arrange that pose with all of these elements reaching it at slightly different times. You know, like people arriving at a party. No one arrives dead on 7 p.m. Everyone sort of arrives in and on and around 7 p.m. And that's sort of how I think about getting into poses. We really want to get the different body parts happening. We want to get into this squash pose. All the elements that are creating this squash pose. We haven't got many elements because this is a very simple form, but the elements that we do have, these little nubbins, we want to stagger them. So I want to pick one of the arms and just get it to arrive slightly later than the other arm. So let's just and that'll also create a nice moving hold, where moving hold is where it's the same thing, just as I described, really, where you've got one pose and then you just take it slightly further. Maybe if it's like someone going over there, you'd have the and then the moving hold, you would just tweak those elements ever so slightly, so you just emphasize maybe the eyes widen ever so slightly, maybe they just lean a little bit more forward, maybe their arms go back a little bit further, maybe the brows just raise ever so slightly, all over the maybe 12, frames or so, just to get that moving hole, just so things don't hit a dead wall, a brick wall, and just like and stop moving altogether. Nothing stops moving. So by doing this as well, this having different elements arriving in the pose at different times also helps to create those moving holes. It just keeps everything moving, looking fluid and looking natural, and it's very nice to look at. Okay, so here we have the finished pass of this jumping flower sack. I've added in the overlap of the arms and the legs, and if I play it, make it a little bigger. There he is. So that one is done. Let me just walk you through exactly a slow version of what I did with the arms and legs. So you can see as he comes down, the arms are starting to drag. The only thing that's the arms are dragging, but they aren't dragging mirroring each other. They aren't dragging on exactly the same frames. One is slightly staggered, a few frames back than the other arm. It doesn't really matter which arm you pick for the stagger. I find it doesn't really matter. Just make sure that it looks a lot better if you have a lots of overlapping appendages on your main form. Just make sure that if you have multiple overlapping appendages on your primary moving form, just make sure that they aren't all moving at exactly the same rate. Just have a few moving a couple of frames prior to one of the appendages, and have another appendage moving a few frames in front of the appendages. It just makes it, you see, they don't arrive at the same pose all at the same time. See that left, our right, his left arm just reaches that same point, just 1, 2, 3, about 3 frames after the other arm. Anyway, and it eases it nicely into the. See there, he's already in his squash frame about here, and then having these arms 5 or 6 frames after the main mass has reached its squash frame, it just helps really smooth things in. It keeps everything moving, as I said, and that moving hold is just that, which is what's happening here. Just keeps things alive. Anyway, and then off he goes up, straight from, just like we did with the bouncing ball and the bouncing box, straight from the squash frame into the upward stretch frame, and up he comes. Now watch his legs. Now there's 4 appendages happening here, and what I did was, you probably saw, what I did was went through animated each appendage all the way through. In fact, I think I did the arms first. I did the whole animation with just the arms, animating, making sure the overlap and the follow through on the arms was working. And then once they were working, I went back again and did the legs, working on each leg and each arm separately, So I went through and did all of the right arm, then went through and did all the left arm, then went back through, did all of the left leg, and then all of the right leg. And again, you can see that when his our right leg has sort of reached its, it doesn't really move much here, so it's not really moving at all. The other leg is still doing quite a bit of movement. There, bang, 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 and it's still moving. And then lead with his left leg, bang. And then the arms again. Are all following through, but they're just reaching. They're just a few frames staggered away from each other. Just so they don't look like he's doing some kind of Mexican wave, both arms doing exactly the same thing. just stagger them, Just it's more natural. I don't know what the heck that was. it's just more natural, and it's going to create a lot of appeal and a lot of appeal, and it'll just feel really nice and natural. And yeah, so we're going to be sticking with the flour sack for the next few weeks now, because it really is, whilst the bouncing ball and the bouncing box are great to learn about the basic animation principles, which will pervade all of your work from now until forever, on complex characters, the flour sack is really the basic tool to start learning about performance and really getting weight and gesture and expression and character expression through a really simple form. But you can get massive amounts of personality in the flour sack. So it's going to be really fun. So I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial on flour sack, the introduction to flour sacks. Like I say, we're going to be sticking with it for the next few weeks. Start looking at basic performances, and yeah, that's it. So I hope you've enjoyed the video. If you did like the video, make sure to let me know by leaving a like and a comment, and make sure to subscribe to stay up to date with all the latest videos as they come out. That's it for Move It Monday this week. Until next week, have a great week, and I'll see you later.